Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's live discussion on House of the Dragon. This time talking about Season 1, Episode 6, The Princess and the Queen. I'm joined here by different looking guests. Darren, you look really different tonight.
Well, just a little bit. I was trying to do my best, dude impression here with my little cardigan on, but I didn't like my hair, so I put a hat on. So make it a little bushy out
There
there.
we are. So it's Rob from Smirking Reviews. Rob, thanks so much for joining tonight.
Absolutely.
Cool. And as always, Alyssa from Alyssa Jean. Thanks for joining us as well.
Yes, I am still Alyssa, though I'm being played by a different actress this week.
All right. So, well, Rob, this is your first time joining us for one of these House of the Dragon discussions. So let's start with you with your overall thoughts on the show so far. I think last time I talked to you, you said you weren't quite as big on the show as we were. So just let me hear your thoughts on what you think of the show so far.
I mean, on my own review, the two videos I made, I was trying really hard to be not throw so much of my expectations after the end of the last show, but it's just not clicking with me. It's on every Sunday night, and I watch it, and I try to watch it with every week with this will be the episode that turns me around, and it just continues to just not impress me the way I wanted to be impressed by a second going at it from a new showrunners, new people. I mean, this production's basically the same, but I'm seeing some of the same old problems from the last show. We're also we've been doing a season 1 rewatch. We just finished season 1 for somebody in my community that's never seen Game of Thrones before. And we watched last night's episode, and then we watched the season 1 finale of Game of Thrones. And it's just every time I watch an episode of the original, I just see the failings of this new show that in whatever direction they're taking. It's just the acting is there, the casting, they've cast great people, the production, everything looks great. The CGI is fantastic for the most part. It's miles above some of the stuff that we see on Disney for their Marvel stuff. The dragons look great, but it's just the characters that I don't care about, and the story I don't care about very much. I never got into the appendices or whatever Fire and Blood is. If I knew it existed before the show came out, I actually would have read it. But I just don't. It's just missing all the investment I had with the original characters, and I'm not connecting with anybody on the show other than the actor who plays Viserys, who I think is weird as a lot of his character choices have been written. The guy seems to be enjoying himself so much. I feel like nobody's enjoying themselves playing any of their parts, but that's just my opinion. Now, this week's episode, we'll get into that, but yeah.
Well, that's very interesting. You definitely got a different opinion than we do on that one, which is good. It's good to hear from a different side. I don't know. See, I think because I've recently mine and Alyssa's parents are actually watching Game of Thrones, and so I've watched a few episodes while they were going back, and they started from the beginning. And when I watched that, I think House of the Dragon is better, but I think the reason for that is because I've seen Game of Thrones a billion trillion times, and House of the Dragon is fresh to me. But it's definitely got a different style. I will grant you that, which I think is a good thing personally because it gives you a fresh thing, but perhaps does not appeal to everyone, particularly fans of the old show. Alyssa, any thoughts on that before we move on to the episode?
Yeah. Well, I've been hearing every week, so you know that I am really, really loving the show. This is by far the best show that I'm watching right now, between She-Hulk and Lord of the Rings and God, Star Wars Andor. I hope it gets better. And even probably Star Trek Lower Decks is up there with it, but there's just such a different show. You can't really compare. It's apples and oranges. And I did read Fire and Blood. I read it when it first came out. And it's not really appendices. It's just a history book of the Targaryens, and it goes through the whole history of the Targaryens. And I am currently rereading the section of the book which the show is covering. And I remember that when I first read that book, when I got to this particular section, this was Game of Thrones was still in the air. There was no talk of sequels or prequels or anything. I'm like, they need to make a show out of this. And I was not excited when they did announce it because I was so disgruntled about the ending of Game of Thrones. But as I'm rereading this, I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. I wanted them to make a show out of this as I read it the first time. Coming into this episode, there's definitely some trepidation because we knew the big time jump was coming. I think so far I'm on board. I think the first couple scenes, it took me a little bit to just sort of get, okay, this is Rhaenyra now. And this is Rhaenyra now. It took me a little bit to get in it, but once I was in it, I'm in it. I do have a little bit of trepidation moving forward about how they're going to pull this off, knowing what material they need to cover. I won't spoil it, but I do know what the episode titles are for the remainder of the season, and you can look it up if you're interested. I'm not going to spoil it here. But episode 9, if you're familiar with the source material, it is super obvious what it's going to be about. And I'm looking at episodes 7 and 8 to get to episode 9. Boy, they have a lot of ground to cover. And I'm a little worried that we're going to get to the end of this season and go, they really took their sweet old time with the first 5 episodes and just rushed through a lot of material in the last 5 episodes. There's definitely a definite possibility for that, but I actually feel that the show hasn't steered me wrong yet. I've loved every choice they've made. It's been a fantastic adaptation. It's probably the best adaptation so far of a book that I have read. I mean, it's only 6 episodes in, so I can't say that it will always be that way, but thus far, I think some of the choices that they have made has been fantastic. They have, the source material is a history book, and so a lot of it is very vague, and some of the interpretations that they have done has been amazing. So I have faith that they can pull it off, but I am looking at what they have left to cover this season, and I'm a little concerned that it's going to start getting a little rough. But we'll see. We'll see at the end of the season how I feel. As far as this episode and the time jump, so far, so good for me. I'm on board so far. And love that we got a lot of dragons this week. I mean, it's called House of the Dragon, for God's sakes. We needed more dragons, so that was fun. So yeah, that's where I'm at up through episode 6.
So I just wanted to address Duke Chronic in the chat saying 5 episodes of prologue. I'm not sure if I'd agree with that. I think they're part of the story. I don't know if I consider it prologue. I just call it the start of the story.
Yeah.
But that's my perspective. Anywho, so yeah, this episode I was also, as I mentioned last week, I was a bit worried about the time jump. I was worried I would feel disconnected, and I didn't feel as disconnected as I feared. I did, but I did a little bit, which I think maybe if the rest of the season kind of justifies it, because I think, yes, knowing the source material, I do know this was necessary. They couldn't show us 10 years of them hanging around, raising children. But it does feel a bit disconnected going from one actor to another actor, and not only that, is the character's 10 years older, so the character's totally different. So it's hard. I'm constantly having to remind myself that these are the same characters that we've seen, particularly the ones where the actors change, that these are the same characters that we've seen in previous episodes. So it was a little bit disconcerting, but I am hoping, like, once we fit into the groove of the next episodes and get used to this new storyline. It's funny because I watched the after show, and someone involved with the show said it was kind of like a second pilot in a way, and it kind of is. It's kind of like, because we talked about last week's episode being kind of like a season finale, and it kind of was, and this one seems like it's another season premiere. It's like starting a new story. And yeah, and I am glad that they didn't wait till season 2 to do this. I think because we didn't need to see more of them as kids. Like, we do need to get get this story rolling. But yeah, I do worry perhaps that they are going at too brisk of a pace, because the character is Lenore. Is that her name?
No, Rhaenyra is the dude.
Yeah. Lenora?
I can never remember. It's either Lena or Lenora or something.
Lena. I think it might be Lena.
It's like
that
Lena.
sounds right.
Like, it's a similar name to her brother. They have
so
names.
So it seems like we, Lena. Yeah, this is what Brandon says in the chat, if I pronounce it correctly. But yeah, we got her. We saw her a bit as a kid, but we didn't really get her introduction to this episode, and then she died in the same episode. So that does make me think they brushed her a bit too quickly. But anyway, Rob, let's get your thoughts on this particular episode.
Well, I'll say this, and I got to agree that this is, I kind of go all over the place with. I was kind of going back and forth with Rings of Power in this. I like Rings of Power because there's multiple stories and multiple areas being covered all over that show. And if you don't like one section, you might like some other story. But this, we're kind of stuck with the Targaryens. And for me, that's been one of the big problems, is if I'm not finding these people interesting, there's nowhere else to go. But that being said, this is probably the best episode I've seen since the second episode. I wasn't bothered by the time jump at all. I liked that they had the same, the themes of mothers and birth and stuff like that. Again, the production and the acting is all really good. I had some issues with certain minor things, but this was the one I hated the least, is what I can say. Like, and I hate's a strong word. This is the one I enjoyed the most out of a bunch of episodes that I did not enjoy at all. In our Discord where we live stream or we watch together, this one we talked less shit over. We actually were watching the episode instead of just typing out our snarkiness towards everything that we didn't like. So that was good. Although I have to say that part of it was because I was on my phone. I was kind of bored through chunks of it. It really picked up at the end. And I liked some of it. But again, for me, it's just that I'm not connecting with these people. The characters are just, their plot lines are just not doing it for me. We've got this guy named Laris, who's like Walmart discount Varys and Littlefinger put into one, who I'm just like, I don't care about this guy, except that it's interesting that I think he's the son of the Hand, right? So he's like kind of like screwing over his own family. That part was like, wow, that's Game of Thrones. That's kind of interesting, even though this guy himself I don't find very interesting. So I like the plot line. I like what they did, what they're doing with, the whole Harrenhal thing. I was like, oh, that's how this happened, I loved the dragons. I loved the really old dragon. I liked the whole thing with that they leaned into about the disgrace of the one who's birthed all of Rhaenyra's sons. I liked all of that stuff and how him and Sir Criston are dealing with that. The biggest problem I had in this episode was Rhaenyra and Allison, mostly Allison. I don't care for this character no matter who plays her. It's not the actress's fault. I just don't like this character, and not like I don't like Cersei. I love to not like Cersei. This actress, the younger one, to me had like zero presence. And Olivia Cooke, who I loved on the silly old Bates Motel, does bring better acting chops to the role, but I still just find her character to just be so, to me, just like, I get what she's doing, why she's doing it. I just have a hard time caring because I feel like I'm watching Degrassi High in Westeros a little bit. Like, just that.
All right, fair enough. I will say, the one thing I will say is that you do bring up a good point about the difference between this show and particularly Game of Thrones, is that Game of Thrones had like a ridiculous amount of different storylines, so you could jump from one place to another. And this is sort of a different take on it, where we're just focused on King's Landing. And I will say that did throw me off a bit when I first started watching this.
Yeah, I guess to me, I think that like you brought up Lord of the Rings, I think of it as an advantage over Lord of the Rings because they're spreading it out, and the first season of Game of Thrones as well, because they're trying to spread out their runtime over so many different storylines that each storyline is moving so slowly and not getting anywhere. Whereas when you are focusing on one, it's going places because you're spending all your time on that one storyline. And I feel that way in comparison to the first season of Game of Thrones as well. As much as I love that season, they had to spread their runtime out. So I actually really like the fact that there's only, I mean, Daemon is usually his separate storyline, but I mean, it's less spread out than Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings, to me, it's like it still hasn't really gotten going yet. It's just taking so long to get going, and part of that is because they are trying to cover so many different storylines.
Well, yeah, and I talked about this in my Lord of the Rings review, where with that show, I feel like I get a strong sense of get on with it, like get to the fucking point. Whereas with this show, I don't. This show, I feel like engaged enough where I'm not like wanting them to move stuff along. But that's just me.
No, this show is definitely better now than I can see this being better than Rings of Power now. As much as I think the Rings of Power has great production as well, and it looks like Lord of the Rings and stuff. It's just, and there is that Game of Thrones feel that like if I don't like this story, there's two other stories I do like, but it is like get to the point, kind of like it's as cinematic as it looks. It's just kind of, it's pretty dull too, but I mean it's like a TV version of something that probably it's hard to translate, but Game of Thrones, the way even the books are structured, it feels like it fits television better, and this like I'll say fits television better, easier than that does, quite a bit.
Well, yeah, no one can fault the production value of Lord of the Rings of Power. I will say that. Yeah. All right, so I just wanted to address the chat. We had Lily Mack who says there was only a 10-year difference. Does an 18-year-old really look that different from a 28-year-old? I think so.
I see pictures of myself from like the mid-90s, and I go, "You are not the same person."
Well, I was going to address this as well, Mark, because she's going to need to get older still by the time, I think there's 4 seasons is what they had said. So she's going to still need to get older. I think it would be a little weird to like have, I think the actress in her early 20s, but like a young actress, like where you're putting all this makeup on her and like, I think it's easier to like, this older actress, it's easier to make her look a little older. So I could see. So to me, it makes. Although there shouldn't be another huge time jump, she does need to get older, before the whole story is over. Both of them do.
Yeah, and I will say that they definitely needed a different actress at some point. As you said, like they couldn't use the same actresses into their old age. So they needed to do a change over actors at some point. So this is as good as point as any.
Yeah.
Like
Unless you're Kristen Cole and you look exactly the same. They didn't even do anything to try to make him look.
Or Harwin Strong. I thought he looked exactly the same too.
Yeah, but I guess they were already in their late 20s or 20s or something. So I guess in the 30s, it's not really that much of a difference, probably.
Yeah.
So I guess that makes sense.
I liked it a lot. I liked them changing the actors in this. I wanted to see. I felt they had, despite how I might feel about them, they needed to be more mature. They needed to feel more mature, even if they're making some of the same mistakes. And I felt that kind of right away. I felt the agedness coming off of them, that if they had just been the same people, I would have just felt the same way I did before about them. Just, they just put some makeup on them. And plus the way that they cast it so well to find people that really do fit. I was looking to at every part of them to see does this fit? And it really all really fits. Even like Sir Kristen, they didn't even have to recast. They just changed his hairstyle and made him look a little bit more weathered. Like a little more stressed out, like the 10 years had been kind of hard for him, made him a little more bitter. You could see that on his face. And that all really worked. And especially like when Viserys, I mean, good Lord, I joked that he looked like the guy when he was changing at the end of Last Crusade. He was like getting ready to turn all like he looked like he was about to change into the dust skeleton at the end there. Like I thought that all looked really good too. And I love that old dragon. I that was amazing. Even though it's just CGI.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to say to Brandon real quick, we're going to keep calling it Lord of the Rings because that's the title. It's called Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. Brandon says, I wish you all would stop calling it Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
The Lord of the Rings movies were good. Well, that's the title, so we're going to call it what it's called. Whether if you don't think it lifts up the token lore or whatever, that's your opinion.
It's what pops out of my mouth. I don't even think about it.
I mean, that's the title of it. So
that's the title. It is. Yeah. Like it or lump it. All right. And I wanted to also address Mike Jones in the chat. Said 10 years have passed. There should have been a little more action. I do kind of disagree because I think since 10 years has passed, we need to set up this new dynamic first before we get into the action.
Yeah.
And that's what this episode, it was like, as I said, it was like at the season premiere. Like they need to set up this new story. If they would have jumped, in fact, if anything, I think they went a bit too fast. I think they could have slowed it down a bit more, personally.
Yeah, I'm not ready to comment on the pacing of the season until it's all over. As I said before, I'm a little bit concerned about how it's going to end up, but I want to see what they do, and then at the end of episode 10, then I'll comment on the pacing. But so we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, it will depend on the rest of the season. Yeah. All right, so we got a lot to get into, so let's go ahead and get started. We already had this talk about the timeline change, but we'll get the introduction with the birth of Joffrey. I'm never gonna get over saying that. It was a power play. I thought it was a good way to introduce what the relationship and the power dynamics are between Allison and Rhaenyra, where Rhaenyra had just given birth and Allison had sent people to retrieve her baby, like immediately, like before they even cut the umbilical cord. And Rhaenyra was like refusing to let them take her baby away. So the bullshit. I'm going to take it myself, even though he really shouldn't have and didn't really have the strength. And this was pointed out to me. I didn't notice this, but apparently there was like a trail of blood behind her as she was walking. And I like how they were walking and there was like this random, I can't remember which family it was. It's one of the established houses in Game of Thrones where these two people from the house was like, oh, Rhaenyra, it was so good to see you. We support you. So it's already sort of establishing that some houses really support her and other houses don't. So I thought it was a really like good way to establish the dynamic and everything. And then once she gets to the room and sees the baby, and then we find out really her true purpose of wanting to see the baby when she says to Lenore, is like, "Oh, keep trying. One of these days, one of these kids is going to look like you." And you see that's why she went to see if it resembled Lenore or not. So we get the whole power dynamic here. So, Alyssa, let's get your thoughts on this one first.
Yeah, well, first I wanted to comment on those two dudes. I thought that was a little random. Like, don't you see the trail of blood? Like, don't you see what's like? Oh, hey, how's it going? Like, this time for you to strike up a conversation. I don't know. I thought that was weird, but yeah, I really loved the opening part. So I read afterwards that they set a Game of Thrones record from the original series and this for the longest shot, like one, and they did two of them. They did 2.5 minute shots. The first one with the birthing scene, and then her like slowly walking to see Allison, and that doesn't always work for me when shows do those one camera shot things, but this did work for me. It did help me to connect to the new Rhaenyra. And I know, Mark, you mentioned before that you weren't sure about how much you connected these actresses to the previous ones. I think the connecting tissue for me was that last week we saw the beginning of Alicent wearing the green and declaring war metaphorically, and we saw her change, her turn, and we saw where the character dynamics were heading, and this is 10 years later. And so to me, what we're seeing here is kind of the logical conclusion to that. So that's how I kind of really easily connected these actresses to the previous ones, was that kind of dynamic between these two characters. And I thought that was really a great way to start the episode. She's like screaming and giving birth, and like, oh yeah, the queen would like to see your baby right now. Like that. I really liked that setup. It helped me to get connected with the new actresses a little sooner rather than later.
Rob, your thoughts?
Okay, sorry, I was waiting my turn. I mean, okay, so first I gotta go start with the thanks so much HBO for adding the sound effects to the birthing scenes. That made it all extra fun to sit there and hear the sloshing and the like that was nightmare fuel. But it shows like how, after more than 10 years that these two characters have been at odds because of the choices that they've made. We can say that, oh, well, this was all duty and this was all forced upon them and stuff, but there's choice here. There's still choices, and they're still stewing. So if not harder than ever, the time has not smoothed anything over. It's made it worse. And I mean, I don't know, if I'm Rhaenyra and somebody tells me that I got to go up there right away, I'd just show the baby like to the queen, who I have no respect for, right? She has no respect for this person. And she, in the past, she's had no problem telling her what's what. I'd be like, she can come down and see the baby when I'm ready. Like, I don't know about that. I also did not catch the blood trail. I watched it twice. So I just want to make sure, because I really wanted to be like a little more like, because like I said, I was on my phone for part of it last night. And so I wanted to really give it a chance. So I watched it twice, and I did catch that blood thing. And that did add a bit of like, wow, this lady is really, she's not gonna she's gonna go out of spite to just go, okay, here's the baby and everything. And Allison's whole thing, and correct me if I'm wrong, or not, even like, if you might not agree with my take on this, but I mean, it seems to me that she's just pissed off that she feels like she was thrust into marrying some old man to have an old man's kids. Yes, she gets to be queen, but she sees Rhaenyra getting to do whatever she wants, and she's the heir, and she gets to have her fun and gets to have her flings, and nobody gets to call her on it. And that's like, that's where I get into that whole, like, is this high school? Like, I know that this happens in real life. People are petty and jealous and whatever, but like when I'm watching it with these two characters that I'm already having a hard time liking at all, I mean, I get it. If I get what she's doing and why she's doing it, it just seems so small. And it's like after we dealt with the lineage stuff in the original Game of Thrones, I'm like, man, are we really? We're not just going back to that. We're leaning so heavy into whose kids are whose. I know again why it's about succession, but also like Allison's whole idea that like her kids would be in danger from Rhaenyra. And I think to myself, like, she knows Rhaenyra well enough to me, even if they're not talking to each other, Rhaenyra would never hurt her kids over this. And to me, it feels like Allison's just trying to, well, if I wasn't allowed to have my fun, then I'm going to make sure that what I chose to do with my life will matter. And I'm going to make sure my kids are the ones that become, that are on the throne. Like she wants something to come out of her sacrifices.
Yeah.
So I get that, but then again, I find myself just not caring because I don't care about this character's motivations.
Well, I will say all the characters in the show, I think none of them are meant to be likable. I think I heard someone maybe attached to the show saying in like Game of Thrones, you had someone like Arya or Jon Snow that you could kind of root for and get behind, where in this show, purposely, there's not a character like that, which is a different dynamic, but I find it really interesting. But as far as Allison, like, not like being kind of jealous of the Rhaenyra, I think there's definitely an element to that. Like when she's talking to Kristen Cole about when he calls her cunt, and Allison gets really pissed off about it. She's like, "Look, we're taking the high ground here. We're rooting for decency and honor, and she's being dishonorable by flaunting her bastard kids as her trueborn kids, and so we have to take the high ground and stand behind it." But behind that, that's her thinking consciously. That's her justification. But really, subconsciously, she is fucking jealous. She's like, well, if I had to fuck this dirty old dude when I was a teenager, and you get to go out and fuck whoever you want and get away with it, no, fuck that shit. Like, who the hell do you think you are? So I definitely think there's an element to that, and I do buy it. Like, it doesn't come off as like too childish or teenager to me. Like, I do buy that this shit would happen in these royal situations.
Yeah, and I think that's something that has been well built up to going back several episodes. I think she's gradually become more and more like jealous of Rhaenyra, that she gets to do whatever the fuck she wants, and then she's getting the crown. I also will say, as far as her believing that Rhaenyra would kill her kids, I think that's the manipulation from her father. Her father told her that last week, which is now 10 years ago. So, and I think that she internalized that and believes that, and I believe that Otto believed that as much as, you might like Rhaenyra, the realm is not going to accept a female heir when there's a male heir present, so she's going to have no choice but to kill him in order to claim the throne. And that was Otto's line of thinking, and I think he believed that, and I think he has now convinced Allison, and 10 years later that's ingrained in her, and that's what she believes. So whatever she used to think of Rhaenyra when they were friends back in episode 1, and there was actually talk of them possibly being like a lesbian couple. There was like some implications toward that back in episode 1 when they were close friends, and now I think that she has lost sight of that way of looking at Rhaenyra. She doesn't look at Rhaenyra the same way anymore, and I think her father has definitely had some influence in that too.
I think that she uses that as an excuse. I don't know if she really believes it. I think that she's hurt enough. Like he's definitely been in her head, but I think that she'll use any kind of thing to justify what she's thinking, and it just so it fits her narrative. I really just don't. I just don't buy this character believing that fully.
All right. So in my notes, I had this written down as Harwin Strong totally isn't the kid's father. So we get a scene with we see Rhaenyra's kids for the first time. They're introduced to the newborn baby, and they call Lenore father and whatnot. But it's very obvious from the way that Harwin Strong is acting, and let me hold it, and giving sage advice to the kids that he's definitely their father, and he's not even making any sort of hiding of it. So much so that later on, one of the kids goes like, "That guy's my real father, right?"
Yeah, that was
good. And then on the flip side, we got Viserys, where freaking Allison kind of confronts him with like, well, the obvious thing, and Viserys is doing the whole la 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 la. To see what Allison says is very obvious. She's like, "Never speak of this again." And apparently he had already told her that. She's like, "You forbade me to speak about what is obvious." And then, as I said, you get the scene with her being really pissed off that everyone with eyes can plainly see those are not Lenore's kids, and yet everyone's just ignoring it. What the fuck? Yeah, I thought that it does kind of present Rhaenyra as maybe she is being too flagrant. Maybe she is trying to have her cake and eat it too, and maybe she was not playing the Game of Thrones correctly, and maybe what happens to her is kind of her own fault for not being more careful. I don't know. Alyssa, your thoughts?
Yeah, I see. I find it really interesting, like just how obvious the show made it. I mean, when you read the book, it's pretty obvious that it's not his kids. But someone can correct me if I'm wrong in the chat, but I don't recall that the Valerians were necessarily described as being African American looking or anything other than white. So it was just like the brown hair. Now it's like they're completely white. They're not even remotely like dark of skin, and they don't. Both of them have blonde hair. Both of the parents, supposed parents, and they all have brown hair. I mean, it's like insanely obvious. And you're right, Harwin Strong is like, "Oh, come here, kid. Oh, yeah," and he's even acting like a father to them. And I agree with you, Mark, that I think this was not smart from Rhaenyra. She's being way too brazen about all of this. She's like, fuck this. I guess she just expected everyone to behave like Viserys is, who, as I think it was a conversation between Kristen and Allison, where Allison was like, "Oh, he definitely knows." I mean, there's no way he doesn't know. But I think Viserys is ignoring it, like actively ignoring it, because it's what's best for the realm, because he has declared that Rhaenyra is the heir, and therefore her oldest son needs to be the heir as well. And so he cannot think of anything other than, like, he can't have anything other than that be true, or there could be issues. And he is trying to keep the peace. He is trying to do what he thinks is best for the realm, which is for his heir to be Rhaenyra and her son to be the heir. And so he's just actively ignoring it, which is not helping things. And I don't know if Rhaenyra just assumed everybody was going to do that. But yeah, I think she has been way too brazen about it. I think that she should have at least, Laenor's got to at least, even though he doesn't like women, like at least get her pregnant so that they can have kids. And then she could, like, I don't know if they have birth control in those days. I don't know, but they need to figure. They need to figure something.
Probably.
Yeah. I don't know if they have. There's a T for that. Yeah, I guess there was a T. There was that abortion T, so she could just take
plan
that.
B,
Plan B. I guess she could just take that every time she has sex with Harwin. But they needed to be smarter than that. I think she is being way too brazen about it. And honestly, I can kind of relate to how pissed off Allison is. Like, what are you letting her get away with this? It's so obvious. Why is everybody just acting like this is normal? So I can kind of empathize with her point of view, to be perfectly honest with you. Though I don't empathize with what she does, and I don't overall like this character, but I do. I kind of can see where she's coming from in that regard.
Yeah, so the chat is saying that they were not described as African American in the books.
Yeah, I didn't think so. I didn't, but sometimes I miss things here and there. But yeah, I didn't think that they were described in that way. So the show is like really going out of their way to like make it so obvious that it's not his kids.
All right, so Rob, your thoughts on this?
To me, almost like, you ever do something that's not right and you expect to get caught, and you don't, and then you do it again, and you don't get caught, but there's part of you that wants to get caught. To me, this feels like it's like one of those kind of situations that just never ended. Like because I almost feel like with the way it ended anyway, this episode, like she feels like she just wants to be busted and no one's calling her on it. She's making it real easy for everyone. Yet you still, even in that situation when you're doing something wrong and no one's really calling you on it, you are prepared for a defense. Like, no, I didn't. You'd still like try to defend yourself, and just it is so super brazen. It's almost ridiculously brazen. Like you said, the guy's at their house like he's the daycare practically. He feels like a fixture there. He's just like he has a job and he's just there like every nuance of his performance in those scenes is a father. He's not like, even the septas don't get that close to the kids, it seems. They'll tell them stories and they'll make sure that they do their lessons and they dress them and all that. But like, this guy is like Danny Tanner, of Westeros, and not without all the OCD cleaning or anything. But he's a real father presence, and it's like I don't even know how I feel about that writing wise. Like, why they would even choose to write it so obvious, other than they really, really wanted to nail it home that this is how Rhaenyra rolls. And I was actually surprised at that choice going into this episode, that after Sir Criston and everything that happened and the close call that she had and the abortion tea and him beating another man to death at the Walmart version of the Red Wedding last episode, I would have thought that she had learned like some kind of lesson. And instead she just like went, no, okay, I can't have this guy. I'll take the next best, I'll take the newest model off the runway and just shack up with this guy for 10 years. It was such an odd choice, but honestly, I didn't hate it.
Yeah, I think it just shows how brazen she is. And I think it kind of goes along with how she was portrayed as a teenager. And I do think we are seeing now she's starting to mature and kind of regret some of these decisions.
Yeah.
All right. So let's see. Let's talk about the kids meeting the dragons, which I thought was I thought that was an interesting thing, because I thought the show House of the Dragons, we needed more dragons, and that's one thing I liked about this episode. I think we got a bit more, and they got more into how, they talk about this before in the show about how they lay the egg next to the child so the egg will hatch, and how here we see the kids like trying to bond. What was it? Was it Luke? Was that the older kid, or was it
Jace is the oldest kid.
Jace,
the oldest brown-haired kid.
Brown hair, yeah.
Luke is the next youngest, and then
okay. So did we see Jace or Luke bonding with the dragon?
That was Luke.
It was Luke.
It was the younger, I guess, middle kid now, because the baby's the youngest. But yeah, little baby Joffrey's the youngest. Yeah, that was him who was bonding with the young dragon.
Yeah, and there was, and so we saw, we meet all the kids and we get the introduction to them, and I thought this was a good way to introduce them. And we see, it was Aemond was Aegon's younger brother.
Yes, amen.
Yeah, and Aemon didn't get a dragon, and we learned later in the episode that half the dragon eggs don't hatch, but you could possibly bond with the dragon in later life. So he's like desperate to bond with the dragon. So therefore, his older brother's being a dick and playing a stupid joke with the pig and being like, "That's your dragon," and he wanders in the caves and almost gets himself incinerated. And Allison hears about this and immediately blames Rhaenyra's kids, which tells you exactly what they think of them, saying they're savages. But really, and Viserys is actually correct in this situation where it's like, well, maybe it was Aegon who did it. And then we see at the scene with Aegon jerking off on the balcony, as it looked like the same balcony that what's his face storms
Tommen. Yeah, they killed himself.
So he's just sitting there jerking off, and I think it portrays the kind of sort of carefree, don't give a shit attitude that these are just kids. And they don't really care about all the royal shit going on. That along with the practical jokes. So I thought it was like a good way to sort of establish that and also establish the dragons and what that means. So Rob, let's get your thoughts on these things.
This is where I started perking up a little bit. I liked this scene a lot, and mostly because it came down to like I'm really interested in Aemond. And I guess it's because that he is the odd man out. He speaks differently than the others. I liked it right off the bat. I think with the first words are the way he says "indeed," like he's just a different cut from the different cloth from the rest of them. And I always kind of am drawn to the outsider character, the one that doesn't fit in or belong. And so I really like that. And it, them how they pranked him with the pig and everything it just made me sympathize with this character even more. I finally found a character that I started to like actually connect with because it was relatable in a big, royal situation, and him going into the cave. I honestly was like, oh man, I wish that scene had gone on longer and that maybe the dragon doesn't do anything to him or whatever, like maybe, I wanted to see a little bit more of that, but I'm excited to see more of that actor and that character a lot, especially after how he runs and he talks to his mother and he tells him what they did, and I can see even more how he's not every one of these kids is the same. They all kind of seem like they all just take it. They don't like a lot of kids. They just I'm trying to come up with the words of like they're used to being royals and they act like spoiled kids in that situation, and Aemon seems different than them, and so I enjoyed it on that level. Plus, again, the CGI just looks fantastic in this scene. Like even if it's just the goat, which I at first couldn't tell if it was a real goat or not. At the end, right before it gets fried, I could tell it wasn't real, but I did like this scene a lot. It gives a bit more into their culture and how this all works. I do like it when the show does that, like talks about the world that they're in and the rites of passage that they have and the different subtleties to their world that they have. There's a different word that I'm reaching for and I can't find it.
No. Yeah, I don't. It does, and then there was the creepy sister as well. I forgot to mention. She was playing with the bugs and completely ignoring.
I was looking at that too.
The blood.
Yeah, yeah. That was interesting how they portrayed that character. I want to see where they were going with her. I want to get back to her in this episode in a future discussion because she said something here that was like, what? But I can't. It would spoil things. So we'll have to go back around to it. But when in a future discussion, I want to like go back to that scene again because she said something that like as a book reader really raised my eyebrows that I can't talk about because it's kind
I
of
felt
spoilery.
like that with something.
Yeah, there was
I don't know what you're talking about. You have to tell me when we're off the air.
I'll come back. Hopefully, it's not revealed next week when I'm not on here with you guys because I think Don's going to be here next week. But I'll be in the chat. And I'll be like,
section.
oh my god, did you remember what she said? But, yeah. But as far as the kids with the dragons, I love these scenes, and I think. We've heard it talked about on the show, but we've never really seen the process of kids bonding with dragons. We also kind of get or kids not bonding with dragons, eggs not hatching. We get that with the other storyline with Daemon's daughters. So I liked seeing that because previously we just saw Daenerys. She was already a full-grown adult, and she gets these surprise dragons that wasn't supposed to happen and surprised everybody and all that stuff. So we've never really seen like the process of kids bonding with dragons, and we got a little bit of that. Although I will disagree with the people in the chat who say they should have cut the birth scene for the dragons. I think we got enough dragon scenes, and that, to me, we'll talk about it when we get to the end, but I love the birth ending book scenes. We have life and death. We start with life and end with death, and both with birth scenes. So I would not have cut the birth scene for more dragons. I think we got enough with the kids bonding with the dragons, but I did appreciate what we did get because I it's just something we haven't really seen before in a Game of Thrones show.
All right, cool. So I wanted to talk about the little heart-to-heart that Allison has with her son Aegon, right as she catches him jerking off and just kind of ignores that. And once she like bursts in and says something like, "Was it you?" And I thought, I can't remember what she said, but it sounded like she was talking about him jerking off, but she was actually talking about him. Playing the prank.
Yes, she didn't give a shit about him jerking off.
Yeah, she did not care. And she does kind of at the end. She's like, "Get dressed."
She was standing behind him for an uncomfortably long time.
Yeah. But you guys kind of already touched on this a little bit and I think Allison's kind of motivation here, how she like drills it in, because as I said, it's kind of obvious that Aegon is just a teenager. He doesn't give a fuck. And I like how he even says in this scene, like, "I don't want to be king," or whatever. That she can have it. I don't give a shit. And he's like, "You better want it." And so I think this is what I like about the show. I think it's a nice sort of. This is something I think the show BoJack Horseman touched on too, is how things are passed down through generations, like different ways of mindset. And I think just in the same way that her father drilled in her head the importance of the lineage and how Rhaenyra was going to kill her kids if she didn't strive for him to be on the throne, she's not doing the same thing to him. And I think this is going to stick with him because she did like scare the shit out of him, saying, "It doesn't matter if you want the throne or not. Your life is in danger unless you fight back." And I think this is instilling that, and we're going to see that sort of in him going forward. Which I don't know if that's actually correct. And I think it's definitely going to, well, I know where the story goes, but it's not going to lead anyplace good. And so she's not aware of it. She's just doing what her father sort of taught her to, of what the world was like. And so she's doing what she thinks is best for the kid. But I think ultimately she's doing damage here. And I find that really fascinating. Rob, you were nodding. Let's start with you on this one.
Yeah. Just because I've experienced that myself in my personal life,
wow.
That people put their, they'll go out of their way to try to put their own stuff on you. And it's intense and it's wrong. And it's abusive. You're steering the way somebody's, path could be towards your own ends. Even if she's got in her head, justified reasons to do it. You're taking you're indoctrinating your children with something that they might not want. Maybe he wants to be more hopeful. Maybe he doesn't want to feel that way. Maybe if somebody actually was filled with more hope than hate and resentment, maybe things would go differently. But instead, we have people, I've had people in my life that just had gone out of their way to try to almost ensure that something bad happens because something bad happened to them, and they've had bad things put in their head, in this cycle of that way, the reason things don't change, why change is so slow in our world, because we have so many people that are just indoctrinated every day with that. It goes on for so long that they don't even realize that the choices that they're making now were never theirs, and it's a really powerful scene. Even if, again, like, it's coming out of a character I don't like, I can still appreciate that.
Yeah, she's basically telling him, no, quit hanging out and being friends with our enemies and to begin up on your brother who is on your side. You need to be dicks to those kids. You need to stick up for your brother. And as you see, and then Kristen Cole, of course, in the scene we'll talk about, follows up with that. And now I think Aegon is fully ready. Okay, well, I have to be a bully to these kids now. I am not allowed to be friends with them, which is really fucked up. It is just such a fuck. But as you guys pointed out, like, it's generational. It started with Otto. And who knows what his father said to him, but he definitely instilled that in Allison, and now she is passing it on to her kids, and I think we've already seen that Aegon is already internalizing that, and I suspect that as time goes on, we're going to see him internalize that even more, and it's a really fucked up cycle, but yeah, it is what it is.
All right, so let's talk about the scene in wherever they were, courtyard or whatever, where Kristen Cole was training the kids, and it was obvious that he was favoring Allison's kids and ignoring Rhaenyra's kids, and this is kind of pissing Harwin off, which I think was probably his plan. And then once Harwin spoke up, then he, had to put the older Aegon against the younger Jace, which obviously Jace didn't stand a chance. And so he was obviously, and the way he was like coaching Aegon made it clear that he wanted him to kick Jace's ass, and his pissed Harwin off, so he started. It seemed like the whole thing was kind of designed for Harwin to reveal himself as the father, and he fell right into the trap. He even did that thing, was like, oh, you're acting, showing more care about these kids like they're your cousin or nephew or son, and then he starts beating the shit out of him. I don't know. This is the one scene I kind of had an issue with, because it seems like everyone's reaction to this is, oh, he just admitted that he was the kid's father, and that's what even Kristen Cole was like. It was like, aha, so you admitted, I thought so, and everyone else seems to take this way, and that's what throws everything into peril. But I kind of took it like, even if it wasn't true, but it's obvious it is, but if it wasn't true, he would have punched him anyway, because that is a foul accusation. And I think they'll get into that later on. So I didn't actually take it as kind of the admission of fatherhood as everyone else is taking it as. But I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe other people see it differently. Alyssa, let's start with you on this one.
Yeah, I do disagree with that, because I do think that he would not. I mean, he was like ruthless, like anger. There was so much anger. If you're not the kid's father, why would you be so angry? To me, that was a very clear admission of being the kid's father, that he was like...
Well, you'd be angry because he's accusing him of treason. And then you're accusing Rhaenyra of treason. He could get hanged for what he was accusing.
But if you're not guilty, then there's no reason to be that angry.
Well, I don't believe in that. False accusations can make you they're just as angry.
No, I think if you
at 10 paces,
like if you know for a fact that you are in the right and you have proof that you are in the right, like let's say they did have blonde hair, and you are very confident in the fact that you are in the right, you're not going to react that way. That's just simple human nature. You're not going to react that way if you know that you are right. And
I disagree with that.
Yeah, no, there's no way he would react
because they reminded me of like the cops that say, well, if you're not guilty, you got nothing to worry about, which isn't true because you do fucking arrest you for shit that you don't do.
Yeah, but you
have a similar situation here.
But the people being arrested are not the ones who are beating the shit out of the cops. If you're paying attention to the news, that's not how it's working. But you have to be afraid in that situation because the cops are going to beat the crap out of you or kill you.
Well, it's not about them beating the crap or killing you. It's about them falsely accusing you being arrested for something you didn't do, which is
right. But Kristen Cole is not arresting. He's not arresting Harwin Strong. He's just accused him. Yeah. But if he didn't do it, there's no consequences. Kristen Cole can't do anything. If there's no proof, if he can, who cares what this stupid whiny Kingsguard person thinks? I don't give a fuck. Like, because I know that I am in the right. But by reacting with so much anger, that was a very clear admission of guilt, a very obvious admission of guilt.
I very strongly disagree because
everyone in the show disagrees with you. So
well, that's why I don't like it. That's why I think it's bad writing because
I'm completely on board with everybody in the show. That's what I would think too if that happened. Absolutely, 100%.
Fair enough. Okay.
What I thought it was I'm more leaning towards Mark's side on this, but what I found interesting is that in the previous episode, Kristen beats a man to death for not so subtly to him, but like talking about protecting secrets. He just slept with Rhaenyra and he kills a man to protect that threatened him with revealing that. He almost kills himself over this. And now 10 years later, he's throwing it in somebody else's face. He's got his own shame to deal with. And now he's throwing it in the face of someone else who's just took his place. There's also got to be some kind of resentment there. Or even when the scene earlier he's talking with Allison, he's had 10 years to walk the halls and think about his decision back then and how it could have gone. Like he could also probably see that he could have these kids. Those could be his kids. Who knows what's in his head? But like as a man, as a guy who's, there's got to be some pettiness here too. But also like if somebody, and I know that like, I know what Mark's saying. Like if somebody accuses you of something like that, it's hard not to just, it's a brutal world that they're living in. And so for dramatic sake, I understood why they decided to go that hard with it. Maybe they went a little too hard, but again, because especially since the last time this happened, the roles were reversed and Kristen's the one doling out the punishment super hard on someone. And now someone's doling it out on him for basically, the same kind of thing. But yeah, treason, if somebody accuses you of something like that, and they also look at where they're at. Viserys basically lets anything go. It might not be the chaos of King's Landing, but it's like the inmates are running the asylum.
But that's a good point though about Kristen Cole, that he learned that does make sense that he would know exactly how to provoke Harwin because he's been through it and he was provoked, so he can now pass that on to someone else to meet his goals.
Yeah, I think it's also the fact that it's already super obvious, as we talked about earlier. Like it couldn't be possibly any more obvious that those are definitely not Laenor's kids, and like where does the brown hair come from? And it's so incredibly obvious that him reacting that way is going to be viewed as an admission of guilt in those circumstances because it's already like everybody knows already. So he would have been smarter to not react in that way because
for sure, 100%. Yeah,
and they already believe that he's.
Speaking of all of this.
Yeah, I mean, Kristen Cole played him like a fiddle. Like that is fact.
Yeah. Do you even see him laying on the ground like laughing? He's like giddy with blood coming down and like his face.
He pulled a Joker on him, you know.
Yeah.
But I thought it was interesting that his what's his name, Lauren,
Lenora,
Lenora, or what's her husband's name? Who's Rhaenyra's husband?
Oh,
there's so many names.
Rhaenyra. Yeah,
I thought it was interesting that his parents had they weren't in this at all. I would have loved to have seen their perspective on this whole thing. That would have been a great dramatic scene for somebody to put up against, like, what, you know, this, like, going up against, if Allison had gone up against his his parents and tried to get them to admit it. Like, I just thought that was a really interesting thing to leave out.
I think we may still get them their
sure.
I mean, in the next episode, we could still get their take on this, because I would like to hear.
I just think they would have.
On it too.
Yeah, I think they weren't physically there, like they were in the Driftmark.
Yeah, but we may get their take on it. I think
it just would have been nice to get it all in one episode instead of dealing with it 2 or 3 episodes from now. Still, especially since fast travel is a thing in Westeros, so we know.
No, it shouldn't be.
Yeah. Well, this show it makes more sense for fast travel because they have dragons that can fly.
Which, there we go. Well, yes, but no Littlefinger's teleported, please.
No, by the 7th and 8th season, it wasn't his Littlefinger. Like, it was like King's Landing and north of the wall, were 5-minute stroll down.
Everyone had a transporter room in their castle. But I mean, and this show,
Damon's got a TARDIS.
See, the big bullshit excuse that people tried to use, like, oh, time was just going by fast off screen, would actually work in this show, where it didn't really work in Game of Thrones. That was just a BS excuse. But anyway, I never miss a chance to rag on this season. So anyway, so let's see. So, all right. So we get the reaction to this where we see Rhaenyra hears about this and so she freaks out. So she goes in her passageways and eavesdrops. A lot of eavesdropping on the show. Eavesdrops on Harwin talking to his father, and his father is like, you know, you're ruining our family, and everyone knows, and you brought this great shame, and now we're revealed. And then we see this leads them to go to Viserys and try to resign. And I love the scene because still Viserys is like, la 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 la, and refusing to admit it. He's like, there's a dark cloud over my house. It's like, what is this dark cloud you speak of? Use plain words. And Allison's like, yeah, use plain words. Describe it in plain English, sir. What exactly are you talking about? I was like, nah, never mind. I'm not going to tell you. And then Viserys is like, well, okay, then there's nothing to resign over, so you're not fucking resigning. So what was, I want to get your take on this scene. Alyssa, we'll start with you again on this one.
Yeah, I did like how Allison jumped in and was like, let's put it in plain English. But it's just the thing that just goes unspoken. And I think that also drives Allison crazy, that everybody knows, but nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody can say it aloud. So I think she was like, finally, somebody can say it aloud. And of course he didn't. I mean, I thought it was weird that he was like, well, now I'm going to go to Harrenhal. Like, why did he have to go to Harrenhal? Like, I didn't really get that part. Like, just send Harwin off to Harrenhal. Like, I have to escort him, and then I'll come back after I'm still very much alive and not burned to death, and I will continue to be the hand of the king as you command. Like, I don't know. And I'm trying to remember what, I think the book might have been a little different. I don't remember that. I don't think that there was a scene where he tried to quit as the hand. I think he was just going up to Harrenhal.
Well, I never read Fire and Blood, so I wouldn't know. But not in this stuff. Not in the stuff I read. Yeah.
Yeah, and so Yeah, that was a weird choice to me to well, no, I'm just gonna go up to Harrenhal for really no reason whatsoever. But other than that, I mean, I did like the scene. I did think it makes sense that it was like, okay, well, if you're not gonna say it and there's nothing to talk about here, you're still the hand. So yeah.
So this is where I want to take this little section for myself. I know that in the original show, there's a lot of backstabbing, a lot of rumors, but it all felt really. It was again performances and writing, and all those ways that they handled those scenes just felt so like crafted, and you would get something like sometimes seasons down the line would pay off with some gossip or rumor, and in this it's just. I called it Gossip of Thrones because it's just gossip. It's just everybody's gossiping, but in not doing it with any of the cool subtlety and the veiled threats, really good veiled threats that everyone was jabbing at each other and all the different strings that could get pulled, and how it was like so much mutually assured destruction you felt if any one of these threads gets pulled. And to me, again, this just felt like the way that people it's too banal and just too petty sounding. And it just like every time it just was like, I know that I can't be the first person to say Gossip of Thrones either. It can't be, because it's just so unsatisfying when I see these scenes that could be written so much better, that there could have so much more nuance to it, that it would make these characters so much better if it just didn't feel so basic to me. It's one of my problems with the show, is so much of it just feels so basic when and we all know where the show ended up. But when it was good and we had scenes like this, you would be riveted. You would walk out of almost every one of these scenes, some small throwaway scene where Varys and Baelish are just talking in the throne room, and you'd walk out of that scene going, God damn, that's some good ass like villainy going on. You know, these people are really got some plots going on, and this is just like, I've got to tell you something, but yeah, you tell him. No, never mind. Okay, I want to resign. Oh, you can't resign. Yeah, it just feels so too simple and less crafted. It feels like less time is being put into these kind of scenes, where it just feels just so. I can watch these scenes on any basic show that I would never watch. You know, I feel like I'm watching Game of Thrones on like CBS. Like I can watch these kind of scenes on a regular network show. Just if one of those network shows had a budget and will let you say, you know, fuck and show tits. That's it.
Okay, well, I respect your opinion as always, but I disagree.
Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. But I think it's a little unfair to compare it to Baelish and Varys. Like a more apt comparison.
It's more than that.
Like,
those were just the first two that I
sure,
came up with.
but I think a more apt comparison would be something like Robb Stark. I think because the whole point of these characters, is particularly with Viserys, is they suck at playing the Game of Thrones. Particularly, and that's kind of the point. Like, and with Strong, because they're honorable men, and we know what happened to honorable men in Westeros; they get destroyed. And I think that's what we're getting set up for. So I don't know. It seemed work for me.
Yeah, I of course agree with Mark, but we don't need.
It totally fits with how the show is.
Yeah,
it'd be even stranger at this point if they started writing it in a way that I liked. So I mean, if you're on, I mean, I'm not, dissing anybody that likes it or gets something out of it. It's just, and maybe it's not fair, but it's like, I've had steak. I don't want hamburger after steak.
I don't know. For me, like, watching those really intriguing, powerful scenes in Game of Thrones, I cannot watch them without thinking, well, this ends with Bran becoming king because he has good stories.
I try not to think that far ahead.
I can't like remove that from I can't separate the two.
I look at Bran in season 1. I go, God, he was so cute back then.
Yeah, I haven't tried to go back and watch Game of Thrones, but because of that, I know that I would think that. But we talked about earlier in the season, anytime they mention like it's the song of ice and fire, and this is the prophecy of the the prince that was promised, and the north, whatever, threat from the north or whatever, and I just can't help but think, and then they're just nobody's gonna be able to see it because it's so dark, and then Arya is gonna kill the Night King, which is not at all what has been set up. Like anytime they mention any of it, it just like boils my blood.
Me too. So Brandon in the chat, but I don't think Viserys wants to play the game with them. No, he doesn't. He's a bad king. It has been very established.
Yeah, and I gotta mention with Viserys too that he in this. I don't remember if have we not gotten to the scene yet with the small council. Are we still getting to that?
Well, we can talk about that now. That was next up.
Oh, okay. Because I was just gonna say that Viserys is just. Yeah, he's not very good at all. He's not even in charge. Like, you can very much see he has no control over his kingdom whatsoever. Because in that, the scene where Rhaenyra, makes a little proposal of hers, where she's like, "Oh, so why don't my son marry, your daughter, and then I'll give you this egg, and we're all one family. Let's be one big happy family." And Viserys like, "Yeah, good job, daughter. That's a great proposal." What a wonderful! I forget his exact words, but it was like, "That is a wonderful proposal," or something, And then Allison was like, "Yeah, whatever, as if bullshit." And we see who's really in control here, because Viserys has no control over what is happening whatsoever. He's just completely. I mean, this was true earlier in his life, but now that we see older Viserys 10 years later, he's just completely lost any control he may have had.
And I do fear with Otto Hightower coming back like this, he's going to be even more under his control again.
Yeah.
But I wanted to address Lily Mack in the chat saying we all have post-traumatic Thrones disorder. That's very true.
I've actually let it go. I know what it is, and I the last time I rewatched it, I got all the way to the end of season 5 before I started going, oh God, here it comes. But I've moved on. Other than I think of the good times. I just think of the good stuff. I think, and especially it helps rewatching it right now too.
I will say I'm envious of you. I wish I could do that. Like I said, I'm rewatching earlier episodes, and I just cannot separate where it leads.
I can't do that all the time. And I was up in arms like everybody else. I started getting, if I hadn't pulled back, I don't know what, I'd probably end up like one of these toxic channels that started out reviewing things and then just became negative all the time. But
I suppose
that I can't do though. So
Lost I can totally do that, because I don't think that ending was as bad, but that's just me. Don't worry, it was bad for sure, but I don't know. I think Game of Thrones is worse. I don't know, but that's just me. But I think I kind of lost my train of thought of what I was going to say. But anyway, I was going to say, I think that's why I'm enjoying House of the Dragon more, because it's so far away it's like 170 years before Game of Thrones. I'm able to separate it until they bring up the shit with the Song of Ice and Fire. I'm like, no, don't remind me of season 8 of Game of Thrones. but anyway, yeah, so the scene with the small council and Rhaenyra doing her marriage proposal. Do you think that she had any inkling of a hope that Allison would actually accept this, or was she just doing this as a way of distraction? Like,
I thought she was doing it like as for show to like show. Oh, see, look at how good I am. I'm like putting out an olive branch, and I am so that like everyone could see like, oh, she's the one taking the high road. Because as you mentioned before, Allison's telling Chris Nicole, no, we have to take the high road, and I think that that's what Rhaenyra was trying to do there. And I think that she knew that her dad would be like, good job, daughter. Like, I think she was trying to make herself look like the good one in all of this. That's what I think was going on there.
I don't think Rhaenyra knows how dangerous Allison really is.
I would agree with that.
There's still that, like, again, because I think a lot of these characters have kind of stalled out in their maturity a little bit, and because of the way that they still carrying on some of this stuff, and old wounds never heal. You're going to continue on that same path, and I honestly don't think that I think she's has a bit of a blind spot for that. I think they both have blind spots for each other. So I think in this scene, she's just trying to placate and do the thing that she thinks everybody, she wants. But she has no idea that, behind closed doors, she's grabbing her kid's face and saying, she's going to kill you over this. Like, you sometimes just never know, like, who you're really are,
Yeah, that is a very interesting point, because maybe we will get the other shoe dropping where she finds out just how dangerous Alice is.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I don't know that if she really like realized how dangerous Allison was, I don't think she would think it was a good idea to like leave King's Landing. So because, and I don't know if by the end she knows that Otto Hightower is, I guess that hasn't been made clear yet that he's definitely coming back, but it's implying that he's coming back. So she may not know that, but if she knows that he's coming back, like, my God, she should definitely not leave King's Landing and live. So I do think that she doesn't really grasp just how dangerous Allison actually is.
All right, so let's talk about Larys, and this is where, Rob, I'm going to agree with one of your criticisms about how Larys is kind of discount Varys, discount Peter Baelish. I definitely, and I felt this before. I'm like, well, I mean, but this was in the source material, to be fair, but it does feel like, oh, they're just trying to recapture this character. And I swear, like, the first time I heard this guy's voice, I thought it was Peter Baelish's voice.
He's like the both guys in the one. They give him like a bit of a, the handicap and the cane and the symbolism. Like, he's not the spider. He's like I don't know, the beetle. I don't know what that is.
Yeah. But his name is even like a shipping name of Little Finger and Larys. Yeah. and I think
this felt so on the nose. Like,
the show is like really leaning into it. But I didn't necessarily hate the scenes with him or hate this character, but I do feel like it's definitely not as intriguing or interesting as Harrison. It does feel like they are repeating the beats. But I did find it a little interesting, his little dinner conversation with Allison, and how what he said something like, "Oh, I don't think that your father would be impartial," and she's like, "But he would be partial to me." And then the next thing is like, "All right, well, I'll go kill my father and brother then, so he can come back." And that was really, well. At least he didn't say, "Let's go murder them." But anyway, so yeah, I thought that was actually just something really dark and twisted about this character, which maybe does set him apart a little bit more from Baelish and Varys, because clearly he's not as clever, but he's more like sick in the head, which could be interesting in its own way. And I think, he didn't admit it. He's like, "Oh, I did this for you, my queen," but he gets Harrenhal now, so I think that kind of factored in a little bit of why he killed his own brother and father. But anyway.
Yeah, I called him discount version of him, but it didn't mean like I actually thought that this, like I said, I thought I really perked up with this because it felt like,
oh, really?
All right, we're getting into some plotting, some good plotting, something's about to go down. Somebody's doing some real nasty business instead of that person doesn't want to talk to me and I don't want to talk to them. And it's like, no, somebody's doing something. That's great. Even if it is evil, at least it's like, oh, I better start paying attention to like what's going on here. I actually leaned into it. He might be, to me, discount them, but he's playing the Game of Thrones. I want somebody to play the Game of Thrones, somebody who's and is kind of maybe not. He's better at it than the rest of them, it seems, right now. I mean, maybe, I think Damon's probably really good at it too. But since we see kind of a different side to him in this episode, it gave a chance for that Laris character to be the big heavy in this one.
Yeah, I would actually throw in a little Ramsay Bolton into the mix too, because he's got that just like twisted, like like really fucked in the head thing about him that Ramsay had. So I think he's got a little bit of that in him too, along with Littlefinger and Varys. I think my thing with him is what is his motivation? Like I want to see like more like why he's doing. I want his chaos is a louder speech. Like, why are you doing that? What are you doing? Like, what is your that's what I still feel like that I need, and I hope that we get before the end of the season. Otherwise, like, he's just doing it because he's evil. And
we're gonna get a theme. We're gonna get a theme where he was like supposed to be auditioned for the job that Sir Kristen got. And he's just sitting there with his cane, like, I didn't even get a chance to go up there. He's just pissed off that he didn't get a shot at Rhaenyra, and now he's just gonna take them all down.
Yeah, well, I should also add that I want to see his motivation, but I want it to be a good motivation too. And not like, well, damn it, I didn't get a shot at the King's Guard, so now I'm going to be evil. Yeah, but so I hope we see some like. If not a speech from him or something, I need some motivation from him. If I get that by the end of the season, then I'm good on this character. But right now, I'm still waiting for that.
I mean, for me, I think his motivation is to grab power, which he has done.
Yeah,
partly, but he still has more sights on it. But yeah, it's just more power.
Yeah, I mean.
His dad was him and his brother was in the way, and he just moved them both out of the way in like one fell swoop.
He could have like killed his brother and father at any point if that's all it was. Like, and also
there's definitely more to it than that for sure. Yeah.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, I know power is part of it, but that's not his whole thing. And like that's not what. Yeah, why is he on helping Allison? Why did he tell her in the last episode about the tea? And why is like. So it's not. I mean, power is a good perk for him, but that is definitely not why he told Allison about the team.
Well, I think
he's playing some kind of game there, and I wonder what it is.
No, definitely, but I think he's using Allison for more power, and that's why he's on her team, and he's going to use her for his own purposes. And you're right; we haven't got a full reveal on what those purposes are yet, but power.
And now. Alex 409 points out in the chat his motivations aren't stated in the book, and that's why I don't know what they are because but the book is more written in like a vague history book, and so in the show, I think if you're gonna like the things that he does in the show is just more, he's more twisted and evil and the show. So I think the show does need to give us something at some point in time.
Sure.
I can accept it reading a history book that we don't get that, but in the show, I feel like they need to give us something at some point.
Oh yeah, I have confidence that they will, though. I don't think they're just going to say he's evil. I think we're going to get more motivation.
I wouldn't be surprised if you see him being Hand of the King. He says that I fully expect you to give me something.
Sure.
Yeah. And I could see him saying, "Well, let me just sit. Let me be the guy behind the guy." I don't think it would last very long, but
I kind of think that his aspirations are a bit less public. like something. I feel like it would be something more behind the scenes, like power that people aren't aware of.
I
Like
certainly
Master,
hope so.
or someone brought up Master of Whispers or whatever they called it. Like that, I think would fit because he's Ferris. But anyway. Anyway, let's go ahead and move on. And where are we at now? Okay, so yeah, we kind of touched on Rhaenyra going back to Dragonstone. So let's go ahead and move over to the Daemon storyline, which not much to talk about here, but it was interesting. As I said, we get Lenora,
She, I think,
something like that.
she's Lena. No, he's Lenor. She's
Lenora.
the dude is Lenor. She is Lena, maybe. I always get the
I
name
think so.
So Brandon in the chat said Lena. It looks like.
Yeah, she's Lena. Okay.
Lena.
Yeah.
So anyway, so as I said, like this is a good kind of introduction and then a farewell to her. But I think it was an interesting dynamic with her being married to Damon. It seems like they did have a really strong relationship, but we see some of that start to unravel here. And it's interesting, but it seems like they did have a strong relationship, but it also seems like Damon kind of favored one of the twins over the other because one could ride a dragon and one could not, which kind of goes along with how this guy's an asshole. So that makes sense. And how we see him in Pentos, and the Pentosi whoever magistrate or whatever it is trying to get them to come stay at this mansion so they can use their dragons to protect them. And she's very dismissive of this. She's like, "Oh, fuck that. Our home is Westeros." But Damon's like, "Well, hold on. We'll entertain this idea." And I think I like when Damon says, like, "Well, it's a simple transaction, like gold for dragons." Like, makes sense to me. And I think that kind of goes along with his character and that kind of dynamic and getting the family dynamic there. So, Alyssa, let's get your thoughts on this whole thing.
Yeah, I absolutely think that that made perfect sense for his character. And I'm glad we finally get a little bit more of Lena before she dies, as she was first introduced as the creepy marriage proposal to Viserys when she was 12. And so I do have to correct the record, because a few weeks ago I was when that episode came on, I was talking about how she was talking about the mysterious Vaegor the dragon, who was the original dragon of one of Aegon's the Conqueror's sister wives, and I can never remember which one. And then how that dragon was gone, and I was like, oh, was that the dragon? Was there some rumor that dragon might have gave the eggs that birthed the eggs that the Daenerys gets? But I forgot that Vaegor resurfaces, and that's the dragon she is flying. So I love how she gets to fly that dragon that she was admiring, and that also kind of ties into this idea of you can attach to a dragon later in life, and which I think she told her daughter, if I recall correctly. She was talking to her about that. And Vaegor is the biggest dragon, and I don't want to give exact spoilers, but he didn't die, so he's still going to be here. That dragon will still be around, which is exciting. I just had to point that out. I think that's really cool how they kind of tied back to that scene where she was like, "Oh, I'm almost so interested in Vaegor. Whatever happened to Vaegor?" And she gets to ride him. I don't know, but I don't want to get too deep into the ending yet. We haven't gotten.
Oh yeah,
we'll get. But yeah, I did appreciate that. But yeah, as far as the Daemon stuff, I don't know. I'm wondering how people thought of their relationship who didn't read the book, because in the book I was like, yeah, they get married. So I mean, but here was like they flirted once last week, and now like they've had this relationship. Because I read the book, to me it was fine, but I don't know if that relationship played well for everybody or not. But I thought that it worked for me, but I also knew that it was going to happen. So who knows?
Well, yeah, I knew it was going to happen too, so I can't speak to that. Rob?
The funny thing is this is my Damon's stuff on Pentos is my favorite part of this episode. The stuff that I liked in this episode the most, because I don't know Matt Smith that much as an actor, but coming into this and how his character is in the first 5 episodes, all the things that he's done, all the ways that he's rebelled and just been obstinate and just been and goaded things and everything else. I liked seeing somebody appear to change. After 10 years, he's kind of on the surface, it feels like he's accepted what his position, what he's about. He's got somebody who wants to just, hey, you know what? Like, you guys can stay here. You can have all of this. You're going to have tribute. All we want is you give us some dragons. We take care of you. You get to live the life, the rest of your life. And considering everything where he came from before, I just liked that a lot. And as much as I've been grossed out by the relationships that these people have with young kids, I bought their relationship. I liked that they seemed to at least like each other on some level, whether it was because they found common ground with the dragons or whatever. I liked seeing somebody almost being normal for this world for a moment. I also and I don't know if how far we are going to talk about this, if we don't want to talk about her pregnancy yet. I don't know, but I don't know. It felt to me like a smaller version of when all of a sudden Jaime Lannister started to change. And I was like, I perked up at that somebody's growing as a character. And even if it goes back, if something happens and they flip flop or whatever, it feels like Daemon, if he flip flops, it's a little more natural. But I was enjoying this moment of peace that he seems to have found.
Yeah, and I think there was a lot of growth as a character, in between those 10 years, like that 10-year jump. I think where we see him now, he has grown as a character because he's still a bit reckless and still an asshole, as I said, but he does seem to have built that relationship with her and does seem to think of more. He's less prone to just take a castle because the fuck with his brother and shit like that.
Well, it'll be interesting to see now how he acts now that his wife is gone, and how much of that might come back. He does still have the daughters, but I got the sense that she was kind of a stabilizing force for him. That she was a good balance for him. And with her not there anymore, we may see him kind of revert back a little bit to some of his old ways.
All right, so let's go ahead. Let's jump into the scene of her giving birth, and the birth isn't going well. And I don't know if it's a maester, but whoever it is over there in Pentos, doing the birthing goes to him, and it's really reminiscent of the scene we got in episode 1 with Emma, and he's kind of given a similar choice. Correct me if I'm wrong. He didn't actually make a decision. Right?
No, he didn't.
No. But I got the feeling that he wouldn't favor the child over her. That's just the feeling I got, but I don't know. I could be wrong. But she, said in the episode earlier, she wanted the death of a dragonborn. And I think this is a change from the book. I believe. I mean, because the book was like 2 sentences, I think, on this part. But it's I thought it was very powerful how she just how she was dying, just crawled out in front of her dragon and was screaming Dracarys until it burned her to death. Like, what a really, really powerful scene. And I think Daemon watching that and seeing that death will definitely affect him. I think it will definitely change him going forward. And I do wonder, thing I wonder most of all is if he's going to be nicer to his daughter that doesn't have a dragon, because her only ally was her mother, who's now gone. So I'm really interested to see where they go with this. So, Rob, since you love the storyline so much, what were your thoughts on this part?
Yeah, I mean, he didn't make a decision, but I liked that they purposely, even if they leave it vague about choice, I like that they didn't make the where he didn't make the choice that Viserys made. It just whether it was purposeful or not by the characters, I don't want to be like my brother, or my wife's life is more important than having another kid, but also like knowing that if they if they're not going to cut it out, something's bad is still going to happen, and then having it be that she takes her own life by dragon in front of him was really powerful for that character. And it had that. This also has like one of my favorite shots in the entire series, where with him on the roof with the two daughters, and the one's looking at the horror, the ash and bones, and the other one sitting down, and him just standing there, this quiet moment, just that really hit me. I loved that shot. I would love that, to have that as a thumbnail for one of my videos if I made one. Like, it's saying so much without words, and it's just it was fantastic. Again, I'm very critical about this show, but when it's good, I will say when it's really good. And there's moments like that just really hit you, and I know that the characters are feeling it too.
Yeah, and it's a really accomplishment for a character, as I said, that we didn't really get to know until this episode, and she dies in the same episode. Yeah, it does hit you. I mean, mainly because we do know Damon, and we see it through his eyes, and I think this one episode did do a really good job of establishing just what kind of character she was, and that this was a good death for her, but how tragic it is for those left behind.
Yeah, and I think it was really powerful that this kind of calls back to that episode 1 scene, but this is the woman taking agency in the way that she can. This is her taking that choice for herself rather than leaving it to her husband to make the choice. And I also want to say I really liked how the dragon was hesitant. Vhagar was hesitant. Like, really? Sure? Do you understand, like, when you say Dracarys, that means that I'm going to burn you, right? Like, he was very like, what? Are you sure? And he was like, okay, if you say so, all right.
How old is that dragon?
So that dragon is over 100 years old because it was ridden by one of Aegon's sisters, which, we're still a little bit over 100.
Yeah, it's about 100.
This is exactly 115 AC or something like that. So, yeah, and that dragon is older than that. So it's well over 100 years old.
I liked that the time it took. It was like it really was like confused. It felt like, like, wait, what? But like in that really slow, like ancient way of something that's been around for a long time, that would never it's not supposed to ever do that, going against its own purpose and still doing it. Just really, really, really good.
Cool. No, absolutely agree. So that's it. Well, I think we go ahead and wrap up discussion here. Do we have any final thoughts on the episode, or hopes or fears going forward?
They really made good doors in Harrenhal, didn't they? You couldn't just break down. You want to break into Harrenhal, you should not try to rob that place, because you ain't getting out.
It does have a history of people being burned alive in it. Yep. So.
I do think that there's a lot of potential still for this series. I mean, if they can perk me up in episode 6, I think we'll see. Sometimes shows, just for me, need a little time to get past some steps.
Knowing where the story is going, and I could be wrong about this, Rob, but I think maybe all this teenage CW drama or stuff might lead to something that you will appreciate once it really starts to kick in.
I'm hopeful.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I said in my my mid-season review is I'm loving the show, but It hasn't gotten to the good part yet. Like it really hasn't gotten to the good part of the story. So maybe people who aren't on board yet might get more on board later. I personally am enjoying the build up, but it really hasn't gotten to the good stuff yet. I think the good stuff is really going to be season 2, to be perfectly honest with you, and maybe a little bit of the end of season 1.
A lot of season 2s are better than season 1s.
Yeah, but I'm personally enjoying the ride. I'm enjoying the build up to it, but I also am anticipating what's to come.
Cool. All right. So we'll go ahead and end this discussion here. I want to thank everyone in the chat for joining. Alex, Duke Chronic, Brandon, Lily Mack, scroll up again, Joseph, and I know a few others stopped by as well. And Alex, good to see you. So yeah, everyone who joined the chat, thanks so much for joining. Everyone watching, everyone else watching this live, and who didn't join the chat, and people watching the archives, thanks so much for watching and joining. And of course, thank you to my special guests for joining. Makes these discussions way more interesting than it's just me talking into a microphone. So let's start with Rob. Thanks for joining this week as our special guest. And just let people know where they can find you and what you're up to.
Yeah, I mean, if you, I've been taking it kind of easy, but you can find me at Smirking Reviews. That's right there. And whenever I make things, it's on a, I don't know, I just kind of do things on a whim right now. I am building up to something. I'm just trying to get the energy and the fear of doing something big and different coming up on my channel. I keep dropping hints, subtle hints in most of my videos, including this one. But I do some Critical Role recaps and reactions lately. But I talk about basically anything that's on my mind. And so if you're interested in randomness and blunt honesty, you can check me out at Smirking Reviews, where I'm joined by these folks occasionally too on my channel when we get together and we just chit chat about things, get things off our chest, and ask the deep questions about pop culture that maybe nobody wants to hear but us. But if you're like us that want to hear those things, then yeah, come on over to my channel, Smirking Reviews.
I mean, who's not a fan of randomness and honest stuff?
Also, I want to say that it's such a great thing. I love seeing the chat, and this is a lively chat audience. You guys are great in the chat.
Absolutely cool. So, Alyssa.
Hi, you can find me over at Alyssa Jean's Reviews. Please, if you have not already, check out my mid-season review for House of the Dragon, which, if you have read the books, you can watch the second half of the video where I give my predictions of what's to come based on source material. But if you haven't read the book, you can still watch the first half of the video where I give my review up through episode 5, which came out last week. So check that out. Also, I am covering Star Trek Lower Decks weekly. I'm doing other Star Trek videos. I'm also doing other videos if you want to learn more about my transition or just what it's like. Basically, I have videos on that as well. So come check me out.
Cool. And if you're finding me for the first time, my name is Mark. My channel is Enchantment of Eternity. Do these discussions every week on House of the Dragon. You can also find me on, I know he's not here this week, but over on Darren's channel, Dean's Reviews, every Thursday night for She-Hulk discussions. And I do also on my channel, I do Lord of the Rings of Power. Sorry, Brandon. The Rings of Power, let's just say that. Reviews every week, and also Star Trek Lower Decks reviews every week, and also other randomness and stuff. I might even have another Expanse video coming out next week, or the week after, I can't remember. Anyway, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you all next time. Dracarys! Dracarys!